Today, as we read our scripture that's designated for today, we are going to examine the apparent contradiction of God's sovereignty and man's free will. Hi, I'm Pastor Mark with Heights Christian Church, and we are going through the Bible in 5 years. We would love it very much if you would subscribe to our channel and be a part of it on a daily basis as we take these 5 years and take small parts of Scripture and read the Bible every day. Can you imagine? And then as we do it together, we're going to take little bits and pieces of where we find Scripture and help us to realize more things about God and for us to be more like His Son, Jesus Christ. So let's dive right into Proverbs 16 is where we're at today. We're going to read the first 16 verses. Now there are more, and we certainly want you to read all of them, but just in the sake of time, we're just going to read the first 16 verses. So will you read that along with me? Proverbs 16. To humans belong the plans of the heart, but from the Lord comes the proper answer of the tongue. All a person's ways seem pure to them, but motives are weighed by the Lord. Commit to the Lord whatever you do, and He will establish your plans. The Lord works out everything to its proper end, even the wicked for a day of disaster. The Lord detests all the proud of heart. Be sure of this, they will not go unpunished. Through love and faithfulness, sin is atoned for. Through the fear of the Lord, evil is avoided. When the Lord takes pleasure in anyone's way, He causes their enemies to make peace with them. Better a little with righteousness than much gain with injustice. In their hearts humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps. The lips of a king speak as an oracle, and his mouth does not betray justice. Honest scales and balances belong to the Lord. All the weights in the bag are of His making. The king detests wrongdoing, for a throne is established through righteousness. Kings take pleasure in honest lips. They value the one who speaks what is right. A king's wrath is a messenger of death, but the wise will appease it. When a king's face brightens, it means life. His favor is like a rain cloud in spring. How much better to get wisdom than gold, to get insight rather than silver. Many of these passages today talk about a king, talk about God in certain ways, and many of them are giving the attributes of God, His omniscience, His omnipresence, and so I just want to look at a few of the passages that we are wanting to read today. And so let's just look at 16:2. All a person's ways seem pure to them, but motives are weighed by the Lord, meaning the Lord can see inside your motives. You know, you may think, gosh, I'm doing this, helping the poor, feeding the homeless, whatever. But why are you doing it? God knows. Maybe it's doing it for altruistic reasons. Maybe it's for pride, or maybe it's because you want to look good and not necessarily caring about the person. But God knows. God knows. Verse 4, the Lord works out everything to its proper end, even the wicked for a day of disaster. This is speaking of God's sovereignty. Now, this is one of the areas that people ask, well, if God is sovereign, do we really have free will? And this is one of the amazing things about our God, is that no matter the choices that we make may be contrary to the will of God, but God's will always be achieved. We see this in the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus, when many people wanted to kill Him, many people wanted to make Him the ruler over, but God allowed His Son to be killed because ultimately that was his plan, that Jesus would become the sacrifice that would bring about salvation for those that would call on him. So this is one of the, it seems like if God is sovereign, do I really have a choice in things? Yeah, you absolutely do. You absolutely do. Let's continue on. Proverbs 6:9. In their hearts, humans play their course, but the Lord establishes their steps. That sounds like God's sovereignty again. By the way, I want to point out a couple other passages that we did not read, but that are in chapter 16. 16:25. There is a way that appears to be right, but in the end leads to death. Boy, that sounds familiar. Yeah, well, back in chapter 14, we read that very same passage. Some of the Proverbs that are mixed together, some of them are very, very similar, or actually the same thing. So it's interesting to look at. And then the last one, I'm saying this because I have, gray. Gray hair is a crown of splendor. It is attained in the way of righteousness. There you go. All right, so even though God is sovereign, we still have to know that we have free will. And if we have free will, then we can definitely be judged by the choices we make. Let me turn to what Paul has to say in Romans chapter 1, starting in verse 20. It says, "For the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature," that's including his sovereignty, "have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse." You cannot be excused by the choices that you make. Either you choose God and you choose to try to live the purpose of what God has for you, or you can try to live for yourself. But ultimately, even though God's will still be achieved no matter what you decide, you will be without excuse. 21, "For although they knew God, they neither glorified him as God nor gave thanks to him. But their thinking became futile and their foolish hearts were darkened. Although they claimed to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of immortal God for images made to look like mortal human beings, and birds and animals and reptiles." So this is the area where Proverbs is trying to teach us to be wise, but that wisdom which Solomon is trying to instill in us is wisdom based on the knowledge of, the fear of God. Without it, you can become futile and your foolish hearts be darkened. So that's my encouragement for you. Please choose God and choose his ways. A lot will go well for you. I'm not saying you're having a perfect life, but it is something that you can count on, that God's way is the best way every time. But his will still be achieved, regardless of what you choose. So choose wisely, my friend. I hope you have an amazing day. I hope that you are ready for our sermon tomorrow. And we will see you from the pulpit or in one of these videos during the week. We will talk to you later.